Welcome to another in our series of webinars about Pires investments and its underlying portfolio of investments. And today I'm pleased to say we're here with founder and CEO Stephen McNulty of Ambisense and Cian Hughes from Shore Valley Ventures. And Stephen's going to tell us a bit more about Ambisense and what it does. So over to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. So just a brief background to Ambisense. So the business was founded in 2014. And really the underlying belief was that we felt technology could play an increasingly more significant role in the assessment of environmental risk. I had worked in that industry for 5 years prior to spinning out Ambisense and really got a feel for the pain points that customers had. And specifically at that time, the major pain points were around not having enough data to truly understand what's happening in a remote process. And DCU, Dublin City University, had an early stage technology for the assessment and management of gas, which we felt there was a natural in the industry. The tech was fairly well developed and it was demonstrably different and better than anything that was out there. So we launched the business and raised funding very late 2014 to get that technology to market. So that took us about a year, as it always does, to get the hardware through its certification and launched the product in late 2016. And we realized pretty quickly in that commercialization journey that while there was value in that data from that device that we had developed, and in fact the device was pretty unique because it was closing a data gap, we kind of realized pretty quickly that, well, there's more value in the data than in the device. And the way to maximize the value of the data was to bring that data and put it alongside other types of contextual information and present a solution. So for example, for that product, it's particularly good at characterizing the behavior of dangerous ground gases. But if you can present that data and bring it online, and then you can add in local weather data, then you get even more intelligence because the weather affects what the gas is doing underground. Likewise, if you can connect water level loggers and groundwater quality instrumentation, that also has a bearing on the behavior of the gas. And so we kind of started to realize that actually the business should and would be about bringing a range of instrumentation, putting it into the ground, connecting up disparate but contextual data sources, and then building out very high value solutions that gave our customers a lot of real-time intelligence that just simply wasn't available elsewhere. So we did that in a kind of I suppose in a typical startup format. We did that in a fairly rudimentary fashion, using off-the-shelf tools to display data, while all the while kind of working on our own internal products that would kind of have a lot more intelligence under the hood. And then last year, that kind of culminated in the launch of Ambilytics. So Ambilytics is our analytics platform. And what it does is it allows a customer to connect to lots of contextual and disparate information sources, bring all of that data together and present it in a kind of a useful format, but then critically to incorporate machine learning techniques to speed up and automate the analysis of that data, and indeed to use that analysis to be able to predict the future behavior of key environmental variables. And that is a kind of as much a business model innovation for the industry as a technical innovation. You know, in our industry, consultants are responsible for environmental risk assessment, and yet they don't necessarily always have the right amount of data to make judgments. And certainly historically, they've not had enough of that data quickly enough to be able to make those judgments in a way that their customers expect them to. So what we're trying to do with Ambilytics is basically present all the information that may be available. And of course, we're taking advantage there of the ubiquitous nature of IoT, you know, the ability of radar devices to feed interesting information, the use of drones, and the fact that most of those companies are selling their data as a service. So that it's possible to kind of connect these disparate data sources. And then, as I said, to automate the analysis of that kind of multivariate data and then display to a customer, okay, well, we think this environmental pollutant is going to have this kind of characteristic behavior, and that is driven by this type of thing that's happening out on your site. And if we can deliver all that information in real time, well, then consultants effectively can can write their reports faster, hopefully, and hopefully write their reports with a lot more quantification in the mix, because effectively the analysis is kind of enabling them to do a lot more complex tasks pretty much at the touch of a button. So what is Ambilytics? So as I said, it's a comprehensive solution. It monitors and predicts environmental impact, and it does so reducing cost, project time, and then minimizing the natural kind of human error that occur across industries where there's a lot of kind of manual manipulation of data, manual interpretation of data. And so what it does technically is in a simple way, it's firstly looking for buried patterns in environmental data. So it might look across 20, 30 variables, and it might draw a correlation and say, hey, this change in groundwater quality is being caused by this, this level of vibration, or this change in ground gas is being caused by a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure. These are things that we like to say our customers can find out anyway if they had enough time and if they had a sufficient budget. But where budgets are threatened and timeliness, and time is the value of money in most of the projects we work on, getting that intelligence at your fingertips quickly and cost effectively really does meet what we think is a fairly large, scalable, and as yet unmet need in the industry. And we specifically built Ambilytics so we can apply it to anything. So we can apply Ambilytics to large infrastructure development, or things like urban air quality, or significant widespread groundwater characterization studies. The key thing we're looking for Ambilytics to be useful is that there's got to be some kind of a risk, otherwise why do the analysis? But of course you find environmental risk across the industry, and that we can connect to and find a lot of data to help evaluate that risk using machine learning tools. And again, we're enabled in that mission by the fact that there are so many companies and so many instruments and so much development on the IoT side that just gives us access to data sources that we never would have had, even 3 or 4 years ago. So in terms of what we're doing, so we have a solution that is particularly valuable in the infrastructure space. Again, looking for patterns that are buried within environmental data and helping the management of very large infrastructure projects. We've recently done some PR around a significant project win that we've had for the Lower Thames Crossing project. That's a roughly a £6 billion infrastructure project outside London, of which we're doing a significant amount of environmental risk management, given the fact that the road, if you like, or the tunnel is being constructed through some contaminated land, and it poses an environmental risk which requires careful management. But obviously, like any infrastructure project, overruns and project delays are fairly significant. And the project team decided pretty early that engaging tools like Ambisense have built, would help them get the data they need faster, get the intelligence they need faster, and ultimately help them manage the project in an environmentally sustainable way. So what we tried to do was we tried to always build solutions where some element of hardware and some element of software, that's what we're kind of bringing together. So later this year, probably in a couple of months, we launch a suite of products for the indoor air quality monitoring space. Again, with Ambilytics at its core, this idea of pattern analysis and being able to predict the behavior of key environmental pollutants, all linking back to a proprietary piece of IoT that we've developed. And again, putting that device around other contextual data sources, and then using the combination of that data to analyze risk. Next year, we will launch a product very, very early in the new year for a substantial opportunity in the water sector. Again, using proprietary IoT technology, contextual data sources, and then helping water companies and other companies manage their assets in a far more proactive, far more compliant fashion. Again, at a fraction of the current cost. And so yeah, we feel pretty good about where we're going. We've had some successes. Particularly in the last year has been quite a strong year for Ambisense, and even with COVID on our doorstep, 2020 still looks like a very, very positive year for us, both technically and commercially. So in terms of some of the key metrics, so one on the left there is we've always historically kept an eye on the average deal size. We feel that that kind of allows us to kind of judge how well the industry is trusting our solutions. You know, like most startups get an opportunity to work on small projects from time to time, but it's only really when you start to have those projects work really well, and then the industry can say, well, if I've used this approach on a small project, well then surely I can just grow it up and use it on a much bigger project. And that's kind of, I think, one of the things that startups need all the time is we start with something small and then we just scale it. And we've started to see that last year with some of the significant deals that we've won, and again this year is no different. We also have quite high gross margins in the projects that we've won. That gives a feel for our unit economics, and also of course helps to pay some of our overheads. But probably more significantly, just gives us a feel for the amount of value we can create for customers, which again, obviously essential for startups looking to scale. And then again, quite strong revenue increases. Last year was a very good year for us, and 2020, as I said, looks like a very strong year, both financially and commercially. We've also raised some money from investors, of course, as we have got to do so, and you know, those investors have been so helpful, not just in the funding, but also in the advice and support throughout the time that Ambisense has been around. And of course, we'll continue to lean on that support as we scale the business. We have filed quite a number of patents specifically around hardware, but also some of that IP is now going to leach into our software space later on this year. And again, we don't necessarily have a significantly a huge customer book in terms of a requirement to have quite a lot of customers. We're quite lucky that we deal with some of the world's key environmental consultancy companies like Arup and AECOM, RSK, and those companies give us opportunities across multiple territories. And that's a key part of us scaling the business is, you know, getting a value proposition that makes sense, you know, effectively to companies that can help us scale globally. And I suppose that will be a key part of our business in the future also. So it's a very quick whistle-stop tour of Ambisense. Very happy to take questions, and yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Stephen. That's a fascinating overview of the company. You've made tremendous progress since the company was founded. You've really gone from strength to strength over the years that you've been operating. I suppose you have a fantastic software solution, and I'd like maybe if you could talk a little bit about the importance of, you know, machine learning, artificial intelligence in that solution for the company. It's obviously a theme that runs through our investment portfolio, and so it'd be great to understand how important that is for Ambisense.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I suppose it's absolutely key. I mean, I was looking at some information from the World Economic Forum a few years ago, and you know, of all the fourth industrial revolution technologies, you know, their view is that AI has the propensity to be the most pervasive. Because it effectively can reshape business models, and we would see that as no different from our side. So when we came to market first, we had an IoT solution. IoT is really, really strong because it closes a data gap, so it gives you the data that you otherwise wouldn't have. But for our customers who are generally environmental consultants, having so much data to analyze can just be another type of inefficiency, if you like. So it can be better than having no data, but it's still data that still has to be managed and analyzed. So we're particularly excited about AI, both in terms of what it can do currently, but also what it can do over the next 5 years. And I think we're all on the ground floor, if that, for what AI will represent in the environmental sector for sure. You know, here and now, I think what AI can be in the future, you know, will be radically different. But for the here and now, for what we are doing for customers today, Ambilytics is a massive efficiency gain, because effectively it takes away the high cost, low value work that a consultant must do in order to get to a place where they can deliver that intelligence to their clients. So this ability to kind of put data together is a manpower heavy task. The ability to kind of trawl through that data and looking for patterns that might give a feel for what's actually happening out there is massively time consuming. And yet it's only when you get that intelligence that a consultant can go, okay, now I can use my expertise. Now I know what I'm going to do to kind of formulate the value proposition to sell to my customer. So very quickly, if you can short circuit the time and cost it takes them to get there, well, then you free them up to really, really help deliver value to their own clients. So that's the kind of near-term win for AI, for Ambisense, and specifically for Ambilytics, is that the efficiency gain is just so powerful that it frees our customers up to do the things that they're really good at and the things that they really want to do. I suppose down the line, as we move more towards AI, you know, it's about the fact that the learning we're getting on projects that we're working on can be applied to other projects. So, for example, in our industry, you know, there would be a fairly well-known heuristic of, well, ground gas goes up when atmospheric pressure goes down. And that would have been the way the industry is regulated in that niche domain for the past 30 years. And so what we can do with AI is actually say, well, if we do that, if we kind of run these projects across thousands of sites, and we've already done thousands of sites, if I'm honest, well, how well does that heuristic stack up to the actualities? And actually, can we propose much more sound and findings that are based on the learnings we can gain from working across thousands of different projects? And so that's where we think the AI component comes in. It's that super learning that can happen once you've got enough data to feed models. So I think it's a combination of what it can do for us today, what it can do for our customers, and then as we start to scale the opportunity, you know, what it can do in general around deepening the understanding that we have around the environmental implications of the actions and processes that humanity engages in.
That's great, Stephen. Thanks for that. I know that you're building in forecasting capabilities and tools into the solution, and that's probably a follow-on from the AI and machine learning. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I suppose the most environmental assessment, if not all environmental assessment, there's effectively a limit. So there's a limit to how much you can emit. There's a limit to what level of pollution is deemed acceptable by a regulator. So effectively what you're trying to do is run the project according to the limitations that you have. And that pertains to air quality, whether it's particulate matter. You know, so there's a typical story that London, you know, hits its annual limit for particulate matter on about the 6th of January every year. But nevertheless, those limits are real. So what you can do with the simple aspect of machine learning is this pattern recognition. So you can basically draw correlations and sometimes causations, although correlations are generally what's more easy to do. So you might be able to say, okay, well, if I want to know what's happening in terms of, say, volatile organic carbons, which are, you know, pretty toxic chemicals that you find can leach their way into buildings if those buildings have previously been used for, you know, different types of petrochemical processes. So if at the surface you can detect how much VOC you can detect at any one time, that's good, and that's what we can do with an IoT device. If from a pattern analysis perspective you can say, okay, well, I understand what's driving that VOC. So I understand that it's been driven by, you know, the ventilation change out, or I can tell that it's been driven by some change in atmospheric pressure. Well, then you've got intelligence because you know what's driving what or what's related to what. But ultimately the answer is, how likely is it that I'm going to breach that limit? Or when am I going to breach that limit? And if I can tell that in advance, I can then do something about it. So the forecasting comes in as the kind of natural add-on to the pattern analysis, because the forecasting allows us to say, for example, we think that if nothing else happens, you're going to breach that VOC limit in 3 days. And that allows the customer who's responsible for the risk to be able to proactively then go back to their customer or go back to the process and say, okay, we must make this change now such that we don't end up hitting that trigger point. And so what we're trying to do there in a kind of an overly simplistic sense, but maybe just to explain it, is we're trying to move environmental analysis from being maybe reactive or somewhat reactive and make it proactive. And I suppose the forecasting angle is really where that starts to become something directly valuable to the customer, because it just allows them to take action earlier than previously that they'd have been able to do so.
Yeah, that actually brings us on to an area that I think is important for a lot of people, particularly people living in cities. And, you know, the whole area of smart cities. How do you think the Ambisense solution helps to improve or can help improve the quality of life of people who live in cities? And how cost effective is the solution that you would be able to provide for, you know, the government bodies or government organizations that are associated with trying to make that happen or drive that change?
Yeah, so I suppose the first part of the solution there is picking environmental problems that are significant, right, and actually solving problems that have a real impact on people. So, for example, we have a solution coming to market very shortly for managing indoor air quality, and that's with a view to optimizing the living conditions for people. One very kind of obvious but very kind of a timely advantage of a product like that is that there is we've seen some evidence that COVID transmission is related to humidity. So effectively, the COVID particles can hitch a ride on very humid air. So it's becoming something of interest to major landlords, both public and private, as to the levels of humidity in the buildings that they run. If that hypothesis becomes something very important, or even more importantly, something that gets mandated by government. But that's just one example. But what we're doing at the first pass is actually picking environmental problems that are significant. So our water solution next year is around optimizing and minimizing flooding. Flooding has a very obvious impact on people and buildings, but it's also a health risk, right? Because you have this wastewater effectively coming up out of the ground. So everything that we do is geared towards some kind of substantial environmental problem that we're trying to solve. And of course, most of those problems are even more pertinent in urban environments when, you know, you have the impact on people, you know, whether that's poor air quality, you know, polluted groundwater, or anything else any other type of problem that you might look at. But the first part of it is picking a solution that actually makes a difference to people, and everything that we do would have that at its core. And the second part of it is back to Ambilytics, and the second part of it is that, you know, if you can use tools to, you know, to analyze and understand what's happening quickly and cost effectively, well, then you can switch your budget from compliance to actually proactively doing something to improve the situation. So, for example, if you've got 50 grand to spend on managing air quality, right, and you consume 49 grand of the 50 grand on understanding what's happening, well, then you just don't have enough money to do anything about it. But with a tool like Ambilytics, if you can say, well, if we can get the intelligence delivered at our fingertips, you know, and it's probably a factor of 5, factor of 10 more cost effective than doing it manually, well, then we can use the intelligence and the budget that remains to actually go a bit further and figure out how we solve this problem. So it does become a fairly significant factor when you can short circuit and speed up and reduce the cost to get the intelligence, because you can then use the remaining budget to actually do something about that. And that's something we see as a fairly significant market pull factor, if you like, from us. That's where the interest is, particularly from regulators, is the fact that, you know, with this intelligence delivered, you know, they can expect and know that people can take action and can do things because effectively they've not consumed the budgets that they have trying to find out what's happening in the first place.
Yeah, it sounds as though Ambisense and Ambilytics could play a very significant role in the future, particularly around things like COVID-19. It sounds as though you particularly around the air quality piece. So let me ask you a little bit. You've touched on you know, the growth of the company in Ireland and then into the United Kingdom. What other markets do you think, you know, you see yourselves expanding into, or the company expanding into, over the next sort of, you know, 3 years or so? And how is that going to impact, you know, your average deal size, or the growth of the company in general?
Yeah, so I suppose we have very recently opened an office in Rotterdam. That happened about 2 months ago, just prior to the COVID breakout and Rotterdam getting locked down like most parts of Europe. But we have an office there, and we think that's the natural next market for Ambisense, that Benelux market, effectively, where you've got a huge amount of urbanization in that part of the world, and all of the products and services you know, that we're developing will work in those kind of urban environments. Of course, obviously, particularly in the Netherlands, you've got a lot of low-lying land, so groundwater quality is a particular concern, but also it's quite a it's quite a forward-thinking country in terms of its environmental stewardship, probably because of the amount of issues that they have naturally due to the geology. So we're pretty buoyant about opportunities in that part of the world, and we expect to start to realise some deals there, probably later this year and through, given COVID. And that also serves as a springboard into mainland Europe, particularly into Germany and into Scandinavia. But we think that the kind of the beachhead in Rotterdam is the next piece of the puzzle. Thereafter, we're also exploring North America. If you look at kind of macro market stats for the size and prevalence of the environmental analysis market, again, which is a $35 billion industry, you find that about 45% of that is in North America, most of that in the US, but also some of it in Canada. So the next piece of the puzzle with Rotterdam Open is for us to gain a presence in North America. And we have a particular opportunity in Canada currently that we're scoping out, and we've also got some fairly interesting opportunities in the US. Again, we would start to hope to see some meat on the bones around those, again, particularly towards the end of this year. But I think in 2 or 3 years' time, I would like and be confident that we would have, a network of offices around Europe. Our strategy would be to be close to our customers, who are generally environmental consultants. You find them in most major cities. And then also in the US and in Canada, again, with a presence in major cities close to those major customers. And then thereafter, I would say looking at the Asian market. But what we're doing is we're solving global problems. We're not solving problems that resonate in one territory or another. We're trying to craft solutions that we can sell around the world. And it's the usual case of kind of proving the ground, going a bit further and proving some more, and then using the fact that the deals are large and the margins are promising, to pay for us to expand the business, as I said, over the next 3 to 5 years.
Right, excellent. Well, Stephen, Cian, thank you for that. That's a fascinating insight into Ambisense, and we all wish you very well for the future and look forward to talking to you and getting a further update in due course. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
No problem at all. Many thanks. Nice to speak to you.